Good afternoon. Happy New Year. Madam President, thank you very much for having me. I actually looked back because Dr. Ron Kirkland usually invites me every year. So here we are, today's January 3rd. Last year, I spoke to this club on January 18th, and the year before that was January 5th of 2022, and Dr. Kirkland, the year before that was COVID, so maybe you didn't have me, I don't know, or maybe you didn't want me that year. By the way, so Peter's here. This is being recorded for PBS. Peter, are we live, by the way, or are we streaming? No, okay. All right. I was careful, mic'd up what I said to everybody, and I let them know, I didn't want them to have a Leslie Nielsen Naked Gun story on this where you're streaming this. So anyway, thank you. Dr. Kirkland, thank you very much for inviting me. To the junior Rotarians, I'm really glad you're here. Appreciate your involvement. I think, number one, you'll develop into Rotarians, but you'll look back at your involvement here, and I think you'll be really, really appreciative of the fact that you did that. So thank all of you for your involvement in Junior Rotary. I know we've got a number of elected officials. We've got both of our mayors here. We've got a number of members of the state legislature, of course, Senator Jackson, Representative Todd. I saw Representative Hurt here. I don't know if there's anybody else. And you all go back next week, and it'll be just like Washington and Nashville, right? I mean, everybody will get along. So maybe that's a good place to start. I want to go back and recap the last year and talk a little bit about this year. And I think one thing to note, as we all know, we're in divided government. So you've got President Biden, who's a Democrat, obviously in the White House. You've got Democrats controlling the Senate, Republicans controlling the House of Representatives. I want to talk about what we've done, if I can, and then talk about the issues that I think we're going to be talking about for the next 362, 63 days of 64 days of this year. If I go backwards, the very first vote that we took in the House of Representatives was a vote that I think was important, and that was to repeal or defund, if you will, the 87,000 IRS agents that I think were meant to target small businesses and families. That was something that was very important to us in the House of Representatives to show that we need to dial back that level of government. Now, I don't know in the state legislature how you number bills. In the House, you may see bills HR, I'm making this up, 3782 or HR 1633. Bill numbers 1 through 10 are designated by the Speaker of the House to be the 10 most important pieces of legislation in any given 2-year cycle. HR 1 that we voted on last year was a bill called the Lower Energy Cost Act. And the title says it all. It was meant to incentivize American oil and gas producers, energy producers, to unleash American energy so that we could lower energy costs. That's a function of inflation. It passed the House of Representatives. Over in the Senate, but it passed the House. HR 5 was a bill, the title is the Parents' Bill of Rights. It's important for parents to know about their children, to be able to have a say in their children's future, to have a voice at school board meetings, frankly, to know what their children are being taught and what books are in the library. And so we passed that out of the House of Representatives. This past year, 2023, we ended proxy voting, a practice where a member of Congress during COVID and even past COVID could give a vote to me if they wanted to, and tell me how to vote for them but not show up in Washington, D.C. We ended that. We reopened the Capitol to visitors. It's your house. It's the people's house. You've got a right to go there and reopen last year. We established a bipartisan China Select Committee to counter China's aggression. That's really important because I'm going to talk about that as it relates to 2024. In the House of Representatives, we ended the Biden Waters of the U.S. rule, what's called a WOTUS. If you're an ag, you know what I'm talking about. You know what WOTUS means. In the House of Representatives, we nullified the D.C. soft on crime rule. The Congress has oversight of the D.C. City Council and the D.C. ordinances. To me, that was ridiculous to soften the crime penalties for violent offenders in Washington, D.C. when Washington, D.C. is seeing a massive spike in crime. In the House of Representatives, we terminated the COVID-19 national emergency, and we eliminated the national vaccine mandate. We passed the National Defense Authorization Act. The acronym is the NDAA. That's so we can fund our military. We can give our service members in the National Defense Authorization Act a pay raise, their largest in history, 5.2%. They put on the uniform to defend us and our freedoms. They at least deserve that. The one bill that I have not talked about, and I saved this for last because I think it's very important, the bill number is H.R. 2. It's the Secure the Border Act. We've heard a lot about the border the last couple of years, certainly last year. And I saved this for last. In fact, today, right now, the Speaker of the House is at the southern border. He asked me to go with him today. I told him, I'm speaking to Rotary in Jackson, Madison County. I can't go to the border with you. I committed to be with you. That is true. But I appreciate him being there. And he's got about 60 of my colleagues with him right now at the southern border. This bill that we passed in the House, the Secure the Border Act, is probably the strongest, certainly the most conservative bill meant to protect our borders, and it's passed the House. Now, I bring that up, and I want to talk about what's going on right now legislatively. But before I do, and I don't want to overwhelm you with statistics, but I want to talk about these numbers. You know some of these, but it paints a very accurate picture of what's going on right now. I've been saying for a long time, the last several years, we've had the Biden administration an open border policy. That doesn't just affect Texas and Arizona and New Mexico. That becomes a 50-state problem. And you know that because these migrants now are being transported all over the country. Not only to Tennessee, as you know, but now to New York and Chicago and Massachusetts. In the last 2 years, the last 3 years since President Biden has taken office, there have been 6.2 million illegal crossings at the southern border. There have been 7.5 million encounters at our borders nationwide. Last year, fiscal year 2023, 27,000 pounds of fentanyl were seized by our border control agents. That's what was seized. I'm not even talking about what's come across our borders. And when I visit with police chiefs and sheriffs throughout West Tennessee, they tell me about the fentanyl in our community. And you can ask them, it's their opinion that that fentanyl came through West Tennessee across the southern border. So it's real. There have been, in the last fiscal year of 2023, 169 people who've been identified who are on the terrorist watch list. So that doesn't count the people who haven't come through. Last month, and I wrote these statistics down this morning as I was preparing for these remarks, Homeland Security officials estimate that we reached a record in December with 10,000 people coming across per day. And last week there was a caravan of 6,000 migrants seen trekking through North Mexico. Yesterday, U.S. Customs and Border Control officials said that there were 302 migrant encounters in the month of December, the highest number of illegal crossings ever recorded in any single month. So this is real. And I bring this up to you because right now, and this is a decision that I may be facing when I go back to Washington next week. In the House of Representatives, as you know, we've had a new speaker, Speaker Mike Johnson, who became Speaker in October. One of his first official actions, he took over about 2.5 weeks after Israel was attacked by Hamas, was a bill to support Israel. Stay with me. I'm going to walk you through the weeds on this because I think it's important. He put a bill to appropriate a little more than $14 billion in aid to Israel. But what he did was he took $14 billion that Speaker Pelosi had appropriated for the IRS that was sitting, that hadn't been spent, and used that money, that unspent money, for aid to Israel. It passed the House. It was a bipartisan vote. It went to the Senate. Leader Schumer didn't move on it. He leads the Senate. So what he tried to do is to take that, the money for Israel, he wants money for Ukraine and for Taiwan. And Republican senators, as we got ready to leave for Christmas, said, you know what, if we're talking about Israel, which is important to us, Ukraine and Taiwan, we've got to first protect our southern border. So if we're going to combine Israel and Ukraine and Taiwan, we want the southern border tied into it. We really want this Secure the Border Act, H.R. 2, that I just talked to you about. If it's going to be a big bill, then we want that included. They broke for Christmas, still negotiating. All of the Secure the Border Act, part of it, they're still negotiating. Every single Republican senator, I know this is being recorded, so I'm going to say it out loud, even down to Mitt Romney, said, I'm not going to vote for any aid unless we look at securing the southern border. So that's where we stand. And I point that out because when I go back next week to Washington, we'll see what the United States Senate does. Do they come up with a bill that does what I painted? And if so, what will we do in the House? Will we vote up or down on it? Will we try to amend it? Speaker Johnson, as I told you a moment ago, is at the southern border right now, getting a bird's eye view. I've got an understanding of it. I've been to the border. I've been to the border under President Trump. I've been to the border under President Biden. And so as we close out 2023 and we're into 2024, these are the issues that I see for 2024, which is tough to predict because obviously we've got a full year. The border, I think, is going to be the number one issue. We're going to be talking about it all year because it's a real problem and it's a national security problem. I look at it, ladies and gentlemen, going back to Israel. Obviously, October 6th to October the 7th, there were Jewish people in America, I'm convinced, that went to bed as progressives on October the 6th, and when they woke up on October 7th, they woke up as conservatives. But there was an intelligence failure in Israel. Obviously, the Israelis missed it. We missed it too. Our national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, a week to 10 days to 2 weeks before October 7th, said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, the Middle East today is quieter than it's been in 2 decades. So my point to you is, if we missed it in Israel, I don't know what we're missing at the southern border with all these people coming across. So it's going to be the big issue in 2024. Government funding and government spending. The national debt is at $34 trillion with a T. We're talking about government spending right now. We've got 2 deadlines on government spending, January 19th and February 2nd. So watch those dates. The 12 spending bills have been broken up into 2 different tranches. It's something that I'm going to be tackling when I go back to Washington next Tuesday. Improving the economy so that families, frankly, can afford to live and to provide for their families. You know about inflation. You know what it costs to feed your family. You know what it costs to fuel up. You know about everyday bills. What can we, as members of Congress, what can I do on the House Ways and Means Committee to reduce that? And then if I can, 2 other issues. And I've talked about one, Israel and the Middle East, and then last, China. When President Xi addressed his nation for his New Year's greeting, he said that China and Taiwan would be reunified within the year. And if he's sincere in that, what is our role going to be, if any, as it relates to China and Taiwan? If I can, I want to leave enough time for questions, so let me dial it back close to home. I asked my team, I said, do we know how many people we've tried to help out in 2023? I'm proud that my team, and that's my Ed Jackson and everybody else that works for me here in West Tennessee, we've worked with over 2,800 constituents in the last year who called in or written in. They needed help with a federal agency. They needed help with some issue. So I will put in that plug. If you need any assistance with any federal agency, VA, Social Security, IRS, please come to us. That's what we're here for. They keep up with this. I've interacted in the last year in the 20 counties with over 6,700 constituents, and that's a real honor for me. The only way I learn and the only way I know what's important to you is if you talk to me about it. If you talk to me, if you call me, if you email me, if you text me. It's truly an honor to be your voice in Washington, D.C. And I know a number of you have heard me say this before, but it's true. Every time I vote, and we take a lot of votes every year, I think about, how do you want me to vote? What's in the best interest of West Tennessee and our values? And what's in the best interest of our nation? Those 3 things marry up. I really am proud to say. It's a big honor to do what I do. It's a tremendous honor to serve on the House Ways and Means Committee, which is the oldest committee in the House of Representatives. We're going to work hard in 2024 for all of you. And with that, let me say thank you very much. And if I can, we've got time for questions up until 1 o'clock or shortly thereafter. So why don't we go ahead and open it up to questions? Anybody but Richard Barber. You're all, no, I just tease. Anybody with questions? Hey, Brad, Mr. Chairman. So the question was, is President Biden coming around on the border? And I think to some extent he is. I told you I wanted to walk you through the weeds on what was happening in the House and the Senate as it relates to the emergency funding for Israel and as it relates to the border. Chuck Schumer at first was saying we don't want to negotiate on the border, and I think that Biden nudged him. The problem that President Biden has politically is he's being pushed by progressives in his own party who say, we don't see a problem. Don't do anything with the border. Now, that's nonsense. I gave you the numbers. And to me, a picture's worth 1,000 words. You see some of the same pictures and some of the same video that I see every day. You see it on the news. You see it on social media. To me, the question is, I talked to you about this, again, this is Washington talk, H.R. 2, the Secure the Border Act. If the Senate is truly negotiating on that, can they get all of that in? Can they get most of it in? And so that's a moving target. Right before Christmas, we were hearing from some of the Republican negotiators, like Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, that they were making progress. On the Democratic side, Brad, Senator Kristen Sinema from Arizona has been taking the lead. But the question is, when are we going to vote on it, and what does it look like? I think it's a lot of this is administrative policy. I want to give you a real world example, and you may have heard me say this before, but when Maya Jackson and I were touring the border, and again, this is under Biden, when you talk about the border wall, for most of the part, what you're talking about are these steel beams that you see that are about 20 feet, go up about 20 feet in the air, and they're actually embedded with technology. So you can walk along the wall, and the wall will just stop. They just stop construction. So Ed and I were at a point in Sumlin, New Mexico. Sumlin Park, New Mexico. So it's the New Mexico border. And that's a place where the wall just stops. We're there, and we see these steel beams that are not in the ground, but they're stacked on the ground. And so I turn to a border control supervisor, and I say to her, what am I looking at? And she said, this is the wall, but the construction order stopped when President Biden became president. Now that burns me up, because that's money, that is your money. I voted to appropriate your taxpayer money for border wall. There's no reason that the construction shouldn't have continued. None. The money was there, but it was an administrative decision. So you asked me a question, I probably over-answered you. I think he may be coming around, but look, my opinion is, until these migrants started being transported out of Texas and to places like New York and Chicago, nobody cared. When you've got the mayor of New York calling out President Biden because of the migrant situation, then you know it's real. But it is real. And don't fool yourself, people have been transported. I talked about the fentanyl and the other drugs. I didn't talk about trafficking. Some of these people have been transported here. And if I can, let me go way up to 30,000 feet. I think I speak for all of you. We are for legal immigration. We are a nation built on immigrants. There's a right way and there's a wrong way. And I just gave you about 6 million wrong reasons that have happened over the last several years. Another question. Gary? Questions about the Keystone Pipeline. That's another administrative decision. President Trump turned it on one of the very first actions that President Biden did by way of executive order was to shut down and kill the Keystone Pipeline. You can argue on philosophy. I can argue on philosophy. I can also argue on jobs, because that eliminated a lot of jobs. I talked about our bill, the H.R. 1, the Lower Energy Cost Act. You don't have to be an economist to know supply and demand run hand in hand. And the more supply you have, the lower your costs are. So during the Trump years, when we saw energy costs really low, the lowest they've been in a long time, you saw American producers and drillers going at record levels. And those types of actions disincentivize American producers. That's an executive decision. So we can legislate, and we have under H.R. 1, this Lower Energy Cost Act. If Senator Schumer would allow it to be put up for a vote, I think it'd pass, because that's what people want. But anyway, it's his prerogative as leader of the Senate what gets voted on and what doesn't get voted on, if that makes any sense. Was there a question over here? Dr. Kirkland? So the question was about the debt and spending. I think you actually did a good job. I'll go backwards and then come back and answer. When you look at the federal spending, like I just told you that when I go back, we're going to be discussing the government spending, 12 different bills. That represents about 1/3 of all federal spending. And you're right, Dr. Kirkland, the other 2/3 are Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. That's almost 2/3 of the spending, and they're on autopilot. And let me take it one step further. So I'm on the House Ways and Means Committee. We have jurisdiction over Social Security. We have some jurisdiction over Medicare, Medicaid. If we don't do anything with Social Security in the next, we're in 2024, 8 years, 9 years, we're upside down. And the actuaries could come back at some point and say the time is advanced. I think you've got a 2-year window. I think it's next year. I think it's 2025 and 2026 to address those. We made promises to people who paid into the system, who are expecting Social Security and Medicare. And not to be self-serving with you, we have, as it relates to Medicare, providers, doctors, hospitals come to us every year and say, we treat Medicare patients, our costs are outrunning our reimbursements from the federal government. We want to continue to treat Medicare patients, but we may have to make some hard business decisions unless things change at the federal level. So it's going to take some guts. I think that one thing that we need to look at in that 2-year period, I look at history a lot for how to solve problems. Not only what could happen, what may happen, but what worked, what didn't work. 1983, now 41 years ago, Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill came together, created a bipartisan Social Security Commission that essentially saved Social Security for more than a generation. I think it's going to take something like that effort. And we're all going to have to get together. But it's got to be something. I was at the State of the Union, like I am every year since I've been in Congress. And you watch the State of the Union. President Biden at the State of the Union said to us, don't do anything with Social Security. Don't do anything. Well, as a leader, you can't put blinders on. You've got the spending problem and you've got the solvency problem. And so we've got to get serious, especially when it's 2/3 of all federal spending. Do we have time for one more? How are we doing on time? One more. Yes. So it's a great question, and we could probably spend hours talking about it. We won't do that because everybody needs to leave by 1 o'clock. But, you know, Israel used to be a unified issue, Republicans and Democrats. I'll give that as an example. I sponsored a resolution to condemn anti-Semitism and show the United States support for Israel. I had 90-something Democrats vote present and 15, 14, 16 vote no. By the way, I don't vote present. I think if you vote present, you're voting no. I wanted to send a signal to the nation and to the rest of the world that the United States will absolutely not tolerate anti-Semitism and that we recognize Israel is our greatest ally in the Middle East. Geographically, politically, if there were no Israel, can you imagine what happens in the Middle East? So I don't want to throw everybody under the bus because there are a lot of Democrats who do support Israel, certainly condemn anti-Semitism. But you've got a progressive splinter that's larger than a splinter that speaks pretty loudly. You know some of the people that I'm talking about, and they're growing within their ranks. When Brad asked me about the border, I talked about some on the other side of the aisle from me that don't see a problem with what's going on at the border. That's not everybody. I'm not painting with broad brushes, I promise you. But we certainly see that. And you know, I hear what you're saying from some people about our party. I think there's probably more that we agree with than we disagree with. Everything is amplified. In some ways, people know less than they used to because there are no newspapers. We know newspapers are dwindling. You probably, no offense to PBS, you probably don't watch TV like you used to. You don't watch local news. But at the same time, this is how you're getting your information, right? You get an alert that pops up, or you see something on Twitter or Facebook. If you're on TikTok, Junior Rotarians, get off, because the Chinese control TikTok, and it's a real security issue. And so some of those people before who may have been marginalized, they can get on TikTok or they can get on X with their followers, and they've got a loud voice. So whether it's anti-Semitism or whatever issue I'm championing, I realize when I go to the House floor, I try to speak for everybody in West Tennessee, but I'm trying to project an image to the nation and to the rest of the world on whatever issue it is that we're talking about. And so we're going to continue to fight. We're going to continue to talk and advocate as loudly as we possibly can on all these issues. I realize I kind of skimmed the surface. This is the first speech that I've given in 2024 other than whatever I told my children on January 1st or when I talked back to the TV during the Alabama-Michigan game. You're the first. But I wanted to recap 2023 and what I thought was important for 2024. We can go down, we can talk about micro issues. Let me end where I started. It's an honor to do this job. And I don't take it lightly. We'll continue to advocate strongly for West Tennessee and for our values. May God bless you all. Thank you very much.